So without further ado, let me introduce John Cooper with Fuels Europe, who will give us a view of the multiple uses of biofuels and renewable fuels. Thank you, John.
Thanks for the opportunity today to share the work of Fuels Europe and contribute. And I've been listening to the conversation for some time. This last session, very informative, a lot that we can agree with. So really good conference. So if I can bring up my slides, I've got a few slides to share with you today to share the work and something about Fuels Europe. So if I can bring those up. So we've done a lot of work on low carbon liquid fuels, and we've also been designing a strategy for Europe to have these contribute to climate neutrality. And as you probably picked up by now, the big framework of policy and regulation is a bit of a maze to get through in Europe. And I'll give you some tasters for that, but a deep dive is really not possible in the time available. The next slide, please, just very briefly, just in terms of who is Fuels Europe. Fuels Europe is an association representing the fuels refining sector in Europe, and we have 40 members, and that's actually every single fuels refiner, and that includes many of the major names that are present and producing and marketing in the US as well as in Europe. The next slide, please. Just something briefly about the European Green Deal. I think actually the language may well have been inspired by the ideas of a Green Deal in the US a couple of years ago, but this has now got a significant structure around it, and recently it has been announced as an overarching package of policies to deliver a very ambitious vision for Europe, including meeting economy-wide, society-wide climate neutrality by 2050. The aim is also for zero pollution of air and water, a circular economy and zero waste, but also quite clearly stated, clean, reliable and affordable energy. And I won't go into the diagram on the right-hand side, but you'll see there's many other elements as well around this. And we are expecting in July a package of 15 regulatory proposals to land to cover all these different things and many more. And then there will be a long process of scrutiny and change and adoption before these become law, expected around 2023. Now, the next slide, please. The work that they have done on this has been inspired by previous modeling work that was also published by the Commission back in 2018. It was called A Clean Planet for All. And this is a graph of the carbon budget that is planned for this whole strategy. And all of the policies are designed to deliver this. And I will highlight there transport in the olive green. It goes down to net zero in 2050. And actually net zero in this case is pretty much absolute zero as well in terms of fossil emissions from transport. But also you'll see residential and industry similar. It's really only agriculture, non-CO2 agriculture emissions that are still allowed in 2050, and they have to be offset with other carbon removal technologies. So my next slide, please. We have devised a whole strategy over the last 3 to 4 years, which we call Clean Fuels for All, responding to this title from the Commission. And we've outlined a pathway that can meet climate neutrality by 2050 for all of the remaining liquid fuels demand. And we've said here for road, maritime, air and transport. And actually we can say, recognizing the need for heat in many of the residences and buildings across Europe as well that are not on the gas grid and have got difficult electricity supplies. We've priced it and we've described it in terms of the emissions and also the technologies as well. And we can show that 100 million tons of reduction of GHG emissions is possible in 2035. And we say that this is complementary to what is expected with electrification. And it's the equivalent of getting an extra 50 million battery vehicles on the road. And we have a request for a policy framework that will make this work as well. I will not go into great detail here. Let's go to the next slide. What do we mean by low carbon liquid fuels? Well, it sounds like, I think you've already been talking about many of the options. We are simply saying every single technology, every single feedstock that can be converted to hydrocarbon liquid fuels should be part of this strategy. And that has indeed been included by us. And we've studied the availability of these feedstocks, and that has been a key guide to what is possible here. But we are simply saying all kinds of agricultural and forestry wastes, but also potentially industrial wastes as well, with a range of different production processes, as well as the first generation biofuels that are recognized as sustainable as well. So it's a combination of first generation advanced biofuels, e-fuels, potentially with CCS in the manufacturing process, and also use of clean hydrogen for the manufacturing as well. Next slide, please. So this slide here is a summary of hundreds of pages of work to show how this is built up. And on the left-hand side here, you'll see the plan for scaling up about 5 of the technologies. First generation biofuels, only a gentle ramp up, but a significant ramp up of hydrogenated vegetable oil technologies, which will be known as renewable diesel in the US. And then cellulosic technologies for using other forms of agricultural waste, e-fuels, and manufacturing technologies as well. On the right-hand side, this is an investment profile, and you'll see that actually, as we go to the later years, the big volume boosts come from the advanced biofuels technologies and the e-fuels. But it gets us to an overall production of 150 million tons of oil equivalent fuels by 2050. Now, that isn't fully replacing petroleum, but it doesn't need to, because we know that in the transport sector, electrification, efficiency, and also some hydrogen will do a lot of substitution for oil. But actually, this meets the needs for entirely the remaining liquids demand, would mean a major contribution to decarbonizing aviation, maritime, some road transport, and yes, there is some available for heat as well. So in the short time we've got, I'm just going to go to my last slide and give you some conclusions. Please recognize that our conclusions have been mostly directed at the transport policy debate here. Europe's climate policy ambition expects only a very small role for petroleum fuels in 2050, a tiny fraction of where it is today, and most of that would be in aviation. But we can see it's very difficult to replace all liquid fuels with electricity or hydrogen fuels. The sheer expense of the infrastructure and also the compromises in utility are very significant. Liquids remain simply the best form of energy storage and delivery for transport and for many other uses as well. And we have shown comprehensively that using a range of technologies and biomass, waste and residue feedstocks, captured carbon, renewable electricity and clean hydrogen, we can make a very significant quantity of low carbon liquid fuels. So all remaining liquids in 2050 can be climate neutral. Road transport may eventually be mostly electrified, but recognizing and rewarding renewable fuels has got a real value in the transition in helping the scale up of these technologies, covering the additional costs of the investment and also strategically building capacity. And heating actually could play a similar role. Production costs are expected to be higher than for petroleum fuels, but this is counterbalanced by the ability to use existing storage and distribution infrastructure and a very high practicality for users. The strategy has got very important links as well, helping to scale up low carbon manufacturing techniques. And in the context of Europe's strong climate and taxation policies, we can show this is an ambitious strategy for the fuels refining industry, but it's very much within reach from a technical, commercial and political aspect. And we're, as you can imagine, right now in dialogue with many parts of the European Commission and the European Parliament and Council as to how we can bring this forward. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, John. That was excellent. I think that understanding the role of liquids as an alternative delivery system is really key to our future as an industry of suppliers of liquid products. So thank you very much for that.